In 1900, one man stood before the cutting-edge technology at the turn of the century and realized that the world had changed in ways that defied human comprehension. That man was Henry Adams, great-grandson of President John Adams and grandson of President John Quincy Adams. Henry Adams was an eminent historian, so visiting the monumental 1900 Paris Exposition was a natural pursuit. The Paris Exposition was a world fair, displaying the achievements and cultures of 40 nations, as well as celebrating the transition from the 19th century to the 20th. The Paris Exposition was quite the spectacle, attracting over 50 million visitors during its run. They could wander grand halls dedicated to beautiful sculpture or art. They crowded themselves into theaters to see world-class ballet performances, puppet shows, plays, and to listen to eclectic musical pieces. But the most astonishing and uncanny of all for the general public of 1900 was the fantastic new innovations on display. Exposition goers were in rapture before a giant kaleidoscope in the Palace of Optics. They were bedazzled by the optical illusions in the Palace of Illusions. On display, too, like at a museum, were the largest telescope and aquarium in the world at the time. Attendants to the 1900 Paris Exposition were also welcome to sample the first-ever trolley buses. Or, if it fit their sensibilities, they could ponder the night sky within a marvelous globe-shaped planetarium next to the Eiffel Tower, which, by the way, had only been built 11 years prior. Many, for the first time, could also view motion pictures projected on massive screens, a public marvel unveiled only since 1895. Compounding the excitement in all of this was the fact that the 1900 Summer Olympics were also held in Paris that summer. But I think you get the idea. The 1900 Paris Exposition was the place to be. But for Henry Adams, and for us by extension, exhibitions in the Gallery of Machines were especially portentous. Adams would recount his experience there and deliver a profound meditation upon it in a chapter from his autobiography called The Dynamo and the Virgin. You see, Henry Adams was born in 1838, making him 62 years old during his visit to the Paris Exposition. He was born with and grew up around the steam engine in the age of mechanical power. And that made sense to him. You use a fuel source to heat up water and convert it into steam, and pressurized steam can spur movement in pistons, producing mechanical motion. That is something you can physically see and understand, a simple cause and effect. And that understanding of technology cohered well into the traditional historian's worldview. Right, historians typically arrange sets of facts into sequences, and then compile sequences into a narrative order. Historical events are supposed to be causal. Everything that is the natural, direct, and logical conclusion of what came before. Henry Adams suspected that that approach toward history was presumptuous and inadequate well before the 1900 Paris Exposition, but after witnessing the technological marvels on display, there was no longer any doubt that the historian and their methodology were ill-equipped and unable to explain the rapid progress and development rocking the planet. Henry Adams found himself before advanced internal combustion engines, new automobiles capable of great speeds, the mysterious discoveries of radium and X-rays, electric furnaces, and brand new wireless communication technology. And Adams, one of the most highly educated men of his time, he could not really understand the new technology. His guide, too, a prominent scientist that worked for the Smithsonian, was also unable to fully explain how it all worked. And the display Henry Adams was transfixed on the most here was an enormous 40-foot dynamo, which was a sort of wheel-shaped early electric generator. For Adams, the dynamo was almost supernatural. It was raw power, perpetually spinning and audible at no more than a low hum. Adam writes about it that, before the end, one began to pray to it. Inherited instinct taught the natural expression of man before silent and infinite force. Among the thousand symbols of ultimate energy, the dynamo was not so human as some, but it was the most expressive. And hereupon we witnessed the death of the historian. As if to mock them, in rooms almost next to each other were the steam engine and the dynamo. The connection between them seems inexplicable. In the one room is, like I said, the steam engine, subject to simple cause and effect, and a process you can physically see. In the next room is the dynamo, and other new technology that operates on and utilizes invisible forces. Electricity, currents, radio waves, electromagnetism, they all seemed a cult to a world unexpectedly beset by them. There seemed to be a break in continuity, a disconnect between the new technology and the old. It felt like, in a blink of an eye, new technology suddenly emerged on the scene, changing the direction of human history, or at least rapidly accelerating it. How could the traditional historian grapple with that? Their sequences and narratives have become utterly jettisoned. Now, technically we do know, and Henry Adams himself knew, that there is a connection between things like mechanical power and electric energy. But the point is that it's pretty abstract and non-intuitive, and almost akin to magic to anyone who is not a specialist in the particular technologies. I mean, do you know how, your refrigerator works? How about the microchips we rely on every day? The ones that enable you to watch the video and me to make it? Sure, you might broadly understand the concept of turbines with magnets on them, but do you know the laws and formulas behind electromagnetism? I don't. And so we sort of just go along to get along, navigating an uber-complex world we don't really understand the mechanics of on a kind of subconscious faith. So what is really going on here? How does Henry Adams react? What is the new history needed? Well, Adams considers these new sciences and technologies as a single entity. Embodied for him is the dynamo. When he looked at the dynamo, he saw limitless power in its endless revolutions, and one could see power in the literal energy it produced. But not only that, Henry Adams suggested that the dynamo was a direct expression of a greater, ineffable force. He paralleled it to the simple symbol of the cross, and the transformative spiritual forces behind that. That is to say, both the dynamo and the cross are human manifestations of inhuman forces. And those mysterious forces, the unknown and the infinite, they naturally evoke in us a sense of wonder and reverence. We stand in awe before the cross because of the power behind it. A power that builds churches and cathedrals. A power that launched crusades and directed the course of Western history, arguably since the conversion of Constantine in 312 AD. But now, now we have the dynamo. So you may now see Henry Adams' new approach to understanding history. What drives humanity? What induces change? Well, it is the mysterious forces behind mankind's cultural symbols. And now to give the game away here, Adams' thesis is that humanity was essentially changing its cultural mythology when it submitted to the power of the dynamo. There was now a new force directing mankind. Right. I mentioned the cross and the power behind it a minute ago, but for Henry Adams, the symbol representing the infinite and influencing the minds of mankind and the paradigm of thought was the Virgin, aka the Madonna, otherwise known as Mary, Mother of Jesus. In Adams' conception, the force behind the Virgin was a transcendent feminine energy. The pagan Romans had Venus, who represented love, passion, vitality, and creation. Venus largely died in the West, and now we had the Virgin, who represents grace, purity, morality, and beauty. She inspired works of art spanning centuries. She commanded devotion. She wielded immense cultural and spiritual influence over mankind. But in Henry Adams' view, the Virgin was never truly herself in America. She found the environment to be hostile. She never fully took hold over us, and that's why she stood to be replaced by the dynamo. I have some select quotes. Some select quotes to read to you from Adams' essay, because I think it's important to do so. Right. So, the force of the Virgin was still felt at Lourdes and seemed to be potent as X-rays. But in America, neither Venus nor Virgin ever had value as a force. At most, a sentiment. No American had ever been truly afraid of either. The woman had once been supreme. In France, she still seemed potent, not merely as a sentiment, but as a force. Why was she unknown in America? For evidently, America was ashamed of her, and she was ashamed of herself. Otherwise, they would not have strewn fig leaves so profusely all over her. When she was a true force, she was ignorant of fig leaves. but the monthly magazine-made American female had not a feature that would have been recognized by Adam. The true American knew something of the facts, but nothing of the feelings. He read the letter, but he never felt the law. An American virgin would never dare command. An American Venus would never dare exist. Right, so Adams kind of nibbles at the edges of why it is the case that the United States was less receptive to the vessel of the Virgin, be it our colonial makeup of Puritans or the broader Protestant denominations, or just being a nation born after the values of the Enlightenment. Whatever the case, the dynamic feminine powers of piety, creation, and authority were watered down in America into a more subordinate, passive role rather than the inspiring force it had been in Europe. And perhaps that left us especially susceptible to the power of the dynamo. The problem with replacing the Virgin with the dynamo as a central cultural force, though, is that the Virgin had behind it a moral force, one that gave purpose and meaning. The dynamo has behind it an amoral force. It is simply raw mechanical power. It is impersonal and has no end. Meaning that making the dynamo, a machine, the center and basis of your civilization imbues humanity with no greater meaning or purpose. And that is pretty much the thought Henry Adams concludes the essay with. In the course of his new history, that instead of recounting facts, tracks the forces that shapes minds in history. In the course of doing so, he discovered a cultural shift happening away from the symbol and power of the Virgin to that of the dynamo. That is where Adams leaves things. In 1900, what would happen next was ambiguous and speculative. He seems to have hoped that the Virgin and the dynamo could be balanced out against each other, but he really had no idea. It has now been 124 years since the Paris Exposition, since the Hall of Dynamos. It is up to us now to analyze what happened after Adams' own time. We have to see what he couldn't. So, where are we today? What is the state of the human condition? Have the people today found meaning and purpose, objectively or subjectively? Have you? These things are hard to quantify, so finding accurate data on the subject is difficult. But I mean, what about technology? How has our relationship developed with it over the last century? I mean, in many ways, it has taken over our lives. Henry Adams didn't have a personal computer. He didn't spend hours a day on a smartphone surfing social media. Not every part of his life had the potential to be on camera and recorded. Adams also didn't have a vacuum cleaner or a toaster. But then again, I guess he never really needed them. But he also couldn't quickly traverse the globe on a plane or get advanced cancer diagnostics or treatments. But he also didn't have to worry about the atomic bomb or consider the future of AI development. As you can see, this is an extremely complicated subject. In many ways, our reliance on technology has reconfigured our humanity and the view of ourselves. People are thinking about this in many ways. We have memers who kind of cope with the modern world in their own ways, and then we have more radical actors, deeply unhappy with the effect of technology on modern society. We won't follow all those roads where they go, certainly not in this video, but as you can see, there is often a common sentiment of despair and anguish. People often seem to think that the proliferation of technology in our lives has led to a deep alienation. I would like to read to you a post from a forum thread from many moons ago. It is not possible for industrial society to provide resources without dehumanization. Do you know how humans are dehumanized? Do you think it is merely because we aren't forced to work for survival merely? Dehumanization in industrial society revolves around the devaluation and marginalization of the industrial relative to large organizations in society as a whole. Whether you have the autonomy to bang Funko Pops together is irrelevant. In this massive global industrial complex, the individual has effectively no power, influence, or autonomy. How? All of your actions and nearly everything that happens to you is dictated by events entirely outside of your control. Are you a wage worker? Your livelihood depends on semiconductors from Taiwan, plastics from China, oil from Iran, corn from Ukraine, and so on. A small bureaucratic decision in China could result in your starvation. A minor technological development in Bangladesh could make you irrelevant. A cloud of air balloons could cause global thermonuclear war and vaporize you instantly. You can say that humans in the past were subject to events outside of their control, and that is true. But humans today are subject to those very same events, yet they are also subject to much more. Corrupt monarchies in the past were frequent, but they could not project their laws across their realm, monitor civilians at all hours of the day, send knights to a tiny mountain village within a matter of hours, or drone strike a target hiding in a desert cave. The amount of marginalization of individuals in small groups is so staggering that for the most part they are irrelevant. Humans are replaceable parts in a machine. Everyone is replaceable. World leaders, politicians, bureaucrats, CEOs, shareholders, generals, each of them ultimately meaningless, entirely replaceable in a society that is so complex that its development cannot be altered or predicted by any person on Earth. Humans are no longer relevant at all. Alright, so what can we do? And here's where we go from simple explanation and analysis of a given text or essay to a normative suggestion or a theory. Naturally, anything I will propose will be imperfect. I'm just trying to figure it all out like the rest of you. So of course, I will be wrong sometimes and I'll miss stuff, but I refuse to let the final word here be all doomer. Right, so the basic charge was that, on a macro level, individual human beings are now meaningless and replaceable. And perhaps that is true and so deeply entrenched that change on that front is nearly impossible. Okay, fine. But my immediate thought then is to return to the small scale. Become someone irreplaceable to those immediately around you. Be a good father or mother. Be a good husband or wife. Be a good son or daughter. Be a good friend. Be a good neighbor. Be an active and strong force in your local community. The broader society and global machine may tear you and your identity down to a cog, but they can never take us away from one another. Family, friends, localism. You will always be relevant there. Your humanity forever lives on there. Sure, that won't save you from a global catastrophe or meltdown, but it's not nothing. You still have agency and a purpose. But beyond that, and to bring it back to the themes of Henry Adams' essay, maybe it's time to replace the dynamo as the animating force behind mankind, at least on a personal level, to the extent that you can. What was lost here was the guidance of a transcendent moral force beyond mankind, and any step in that direction away from the subordination to the coldly amoral machine would then be the right one. Believe in something bigger than yourself, a truth beyond. You can bring back and respect the Virgin again, but I think you can be even broader than that. Because, just spitballing under Adam's framework here, I think the idea is to recognize a realness or perfection beyond mankind. And that idea could theoretically be represented in various forms. But just believing in something is hard, and here's where I will really get into trouble for grasping. Because, just as a loose thought, maybe you can even justify a burgeoning belief in the infinite and the transcendent good via secular means, through the Übermensch, and through the absurd, using relativism or subjectivism to justify a belief in an objectivity, so to speak. These are just nebulous and developing thoughts, though. Once again, I don't pretend to have all the answers or everything all neatly worked out here. In no way do I see myself as the final word or ultimate arbiter of anything, really. Well and truly, I just want to make people think and to open up to them larger conversations that need to be had. If I have become overzealous or overambitious in my pursuits, if I have made the fool of myself, I will take solace only in the fact that I had at least believed in something once. And you know what? I hope I look back on this one day and cringe. The Dynamo and the Virgin. What did you think of this writing? Did Adams make sharp observations about the likely course of technological development and culture? I'll leave it up to you. As for me, I wish you a great rest of your day. If you like this content, please do consider subscribing and leaving a comment. All right. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you have a good one.